Now, we are tracking the developments between China and the United States, and we have heard Trump hailing a total reset of Chinese ties. That phone call between President Trump and President Xi did not materialize last week, but he has since said in his social media post that he is willing to travel to China to meet with Xi, that the relationship was important. So what can we expect from them next?
So I think that what we'll see in the months ahead is a rather drawn-out process of establishing communication channels, Mr. Bessent and others having his negotiations with China, and slowly building to a meeting between President Trump and President Xi, which I think the Chinese side is going to be cautious about, but they would like to have that meeting, and they would especially like to have it on terms that they can control. And a visit to China itself, I think, would be quite welcome from the Chinese perspective. I do think it's going to be a bumpy few months, however, and not just smooth sailing. It's important to remember that even after this U.S. walk back, the tariff level is quite high. Additional measures are being taken by both sides. You just made a statement about the copolymers tariff that China is imposing. And so there will be lots of bumps in the road, even getting to that first Trump-Xi meeting.
Now, in terms of the China and the United States, there has been a de-escalation, but I want to ask this from the outside, as potentially other countries watching the developments between China and the United States. Is there a credibility issue for the U.S. now, given that China retaliated tit for tat, other countries did not, and China's tariffs now have been brought down to 10 plus 20? How can this be interpreted by other countries?
So you saw Mr. Secretary Bessent trying to reestablish credibility and reestablish leverage based upon the Liberation Day tariffs, which have now been in part eased. I do think that other countries can look at this and think that a certain amount of brinksmanship with the United States may work in their favor. It's clear that President Trump no longer wants to have highly elevated tariff levels on all these countries. He has learned that would have a detrimental impact on both the United States economy and his own political situation. However, if they push it too far and play a game of chicken too hard with the United States, they could find themselves in some severe temporary pain. So I think a lot of sophisticated negotiators from around Asia are going to walk that tightrope between standing up to the United States and accommodating it in order to get to a resolution, hopefully by the summer.
So the anti-dumping duties on plastics, this was an investigation that was initiated several months back. Is that an indication with the latest in terms of the anti-dumping duties that it is business as usual between China and the United States?
It's more like business as usual, but it's still not business as usual. And remember, business as usual is fraught with risk, where there's going to be new tariffs. The United States is conducting investigations into 232 tariffs on pharmaceuticals, on semiconductors. There's a potential for more export controls by the United States, and a potential for additional actions by the China side. So I think it's a bumpy landscape. If that's business as usual, then that's business as usual. But I think there's an extra element of risk in the situation where the United States was willing to go ballistic on China and pulled it back sharply. I wouldn't quite venture to call it business as usual.
We had President Trump in the Middle East last week for his first overseas trip for his second term. He signed one of the largest arms deals in history, also big in terms of AI infrastructure for Saudi Arabia with NVIDIA and AMD chips. Now, in terms of China, they are also good friends with Saudi. They've built out the 5G network there, also building out the AI infrastructure. In terms of the building out and building of ties, is China doing it better or the U.S. when it comes to Saudi Arabia?
So I think this trip to the Middle East by President Trump showed the Trump model at its best, working with counterpart governments that are highly united under unitary leadership, ready to make deals. And President Trump clearly also ready to make deals. He made some deals. Some of these deals were pretty good, at least on the face of it. China has a similar approach to the region. I think the United States in that context has a lot to offer the Middle East and has been trying to do so. Who's ahead, I think, depends on the subsector, on the specific issue, and it's probably pretty hard to handicap, and it's maybe not even the right framing, because the right framing is that the Middle East is successfully navigating, manipulating both superpowers to its advantage, using its its leverage as a energy superpower and growing financial center.
Ambassador, we're just seeing some lines from the Statistics Bureau, and just bring everybody up to speed with what they're saying. China says we need to recognize that the internal driving force for investment growth is obviously insufficient. We need to improve the efficiency of investment and continue to optimize the structure of investment. Foreign trade overcame difficulties and maintained steady growth in April, demonstrated strong resilience and international competitiveness. The reduction of tariffs by China and the United States in the next stage is conducive to the growth of bilateral trade and the recovery of the world economy. What is your response?
So sounds like an accurate description of the situation in China. What the whole world is hoping for is that, based upon the easing of the tariffs, that China does not let up on the process of pushing the economy in the direction of more domestic demand, more consumer-led growth, and investment in based on market principles determining on return on investment rather than state-led initiatives. And that's, I think, the direction that China is headed over the long term. Each time the pressures lets up internationally, sometimes there's a sidestep. And so hopefully China will really push forward with these reform measures to push consumption.